We have from Toronto, Carlo Colaiacovo, former Leaf, now of TSN 1050, as if he's not sick already of talking about the Austin Matthews incident. I got to start there, Carlo, if you don't mind. And our simple question is, well, two-part. What do you feel about this incident? And two, will it cost him a shot at the Leafs captaincy, do you think?
I think my feeling behind it is just it's really, really bad timing. And it's obviously it's a situation that doesn't look good on anybody, and especially Austin Matthews. Anytime we live in an age of Me Too, we live in an age of social media where everybody, everywhere you go, everybody's got a camera, so you've got to sort of watch what you do and where you do it. And I guess the sensitivity behind who it is and where it's from magnifies it by 100. We're about a guy who's in a conversation of being the future captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we're talking about the sports city of Toronto, where, like I said, everything gets magnified by 100. And I think let's not dismiss the severity behind the allegations here. I mean, here's a guy who's acting foolish in public and has been accused of being a threat to a woman in the early hours of the morning. So until things get sorted out and the truth comes out and we hear both sides. Matthews made a comment on it today. He didn't really say much. All he did say is that he does regret this situation. But the thing that is more confusing for me is why wasn't this brought to the team's attention earlier so they could get out in front of it and maybe protect the player? And to me, if this is a guy that you're deciding to make your captain, it's about the maturity level that you hoped he would have to carry on a role of being a captain of a team.
So you consider that. Do you think they move on and name somebody else a captain, like Morgan Riley or John Tavares instead, and wait? Or do you think they wait to see this play out?
Here's the thing. My view from the beginning of all this was that I chose John Tavares to be the right candidate for this team to be the captain, because not to take anything away from Austin Matthews, I think he's an outstanding player. His game speaks for itself. But a player who played the game and who got to play with great captains and play with guys that have sort of been handed the role of captaincy at a young age compared to an older age, you need to grow into that role. And especially a young player in a market like Toronto, the pressure enough is to perform. And when you're Austin Matthews, that's all you want him to do, is you want him to go out there and perform, especially when you got other guys that are available, or at least other guys that are better fit for the job of being a captain. And two guys, like I said, John Tavares and Morgan Riley. Morgan Riley's been a day one guy. All he's known is playing in Toronto. He's a guy who's sort of groomed himself into that role. And at the end of the day, I just don't think you need to put that kind of pressure on a young player when really he has to deal with enough on his own and playing hockey. So John Tavares has been a captain. He understands the role of a captain. He understands what it means to be a captain. At the end of the day, you need a guy as a captain that can be a sounding board from the players to the coach. And usually when you need that or want to find that, you lean towards an older player.
Carlo, I want to ask you about some storylines aside from the Maple Leafs. Maybe you get tired of talking about the Leafs. I could see it if you did. Did anybody that you know pick the St. Louis Blues to win the Stanley Cup last year? Because we go around and we talk about these preseason predictions. I didn't see it anywhere. So that's a cool storyline to repeat. And does it even matter what predictions are right now?
Well, I think the hardest sport to predict is the NHL. And I think the St. Louis Blues story last year says it all. A team that was in last place. Like, think about it, last place on January 2nd. And here's a team that rallies around a goalie, rallies around the coach, rallies around a song, and more importantly, around a young girl who was dealing with her own battle in Kayla Anderson. So it's an incredible story. I think after the Ryan O'Reilly trade, I think there was people out there that maybe predicted that it could have been a Stanley Cup contender. But given the way they started the season and where they were at the midpoint, I would have to say that almost 0% of the public out there even thought the Blues were even a playoff team. But that's why you play the games. That's the difference of a team finding something to rally around, finding a way to connect at the right time of year. And they found it. Jordan Binnington was an incredible story. I don't think we've seen anything like this, at least over the last decade or two. They win the Stanley Cup, and they found a way to bring it all together at the right time of the year, which is what hockey's all about. I mean, could you predict that the Tampa Bay Lightning losing 4 straight in the first round of the playoffs? I don't think anybody predicted that. I don't think there was even odds in Vegas of that happening. And if they were, they'd be crazy. But that's why you play the games, and that's why hockey is such a fun game to watch, and probably one of the only sports that has the most parity.
One of the coolest things about the show is we're not tied to borders being on Facebook. But I'll ask you about 2 markets that you probably don't talk about enough. But we talked about Arizona and the Coyotes yesterday, and we kind of scoffed at their notion that they think they might be a playoff contender. And
because of Phil Kessel.
Because of Phil Kessel. But then I also want to ask you about
Joel
Quenneville in Florida, really raising the expectations there. So Arizona, Florida, what's the outlook for those 2 teams and their chances of the playoffs?
Well, I'll start with Arizona first. That's a team that's developed around a young core. They believe that they played some really good hockey down the stretch, but what they were missing was goal scoring. And they believe that adding a guy who's a consistent 30-goal scorer, a guy who can play every game of the season, maybe reconnect with a coach in Rick Tocchet that he had a lot of success with in Pittsburgh, having a full year of health with their goaltenders. And to be honest with you, maybe one of the weakest divisions in hockey, in the Pacific Division, where other than the San Jose Sharks, it's really anybody's game. I mean, can Calgary continue the step that they took last year? I mean, they just signed Matthew Tkachuk today. That's an important piece for them. Edmonton with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, they've made a lot of changes there. Vancouver, to me, is a team that I would pay most attention to because they've made a lot of positive improvements throughout the offseason. But Arizona's right there. I mean, they missed the playoffs only by a couple points last year. And, if they can find a way to get it going, clicking early in the season and find some consistency, they definitely have a chance. But I'm sorry, who was the other team you asked about? The Florida Panthers?
Florida, yeah, and Quenneville.
Well, to me, this is the most intriguing team for me for 2 reasons. One, you bring in a Stanley Cup caliber coach where the talent's already been there in years past, but they just haven't found a way to put it together. But most importantly, they've solidified the goalie position. They're bringing in one of the best goalies in the league, according to NHL.com, the second best goalie in the league in Bobrovsky. You saw what he did last year with the Columbus Blue Jackets and with his whole tenure with Columbus. He could be the difference in a series and the difference in a season. You get good goaltending, it automatically creates more confidence in your forward group. But the thing for me is they play, to me, in one of the toughest divisions in hockey, the Atlantic Division. Again, going back to NHL.com's ranking of goalies, you've got 4 of the top 10 goalies in the league that exist in that division, and that's not even including Freddie Anderson for the Maple Leafs, who I consider to be a top 10 goalie. So Tampa's going to be a powerhouse. They got a lot of their core coming back. What's the season going to be like for Boston? They've got an aging core that put on a lot of mileage last year. Can they continue to progress, or are they expected to take a step back? You got the Maple Leafs, who are in the conversation of being contenders. Montreal missed the playoffs by 2 points. Buffalo is a team that made some changes, looking to take a next step. Detroit's a young team with Steve Yzerman, who just took over, and the success he's had everywhere he's went. So definitely a tough division to come out of. But Florida, to me, is a team that I think is capable of taking the next step next year.
Carlo, this has been outstanding. Very good look across the league. I appreciate it, my man. I can see why TSN's put you in that role. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, and enjoy the rest of the...
It's been a real pleasure to do this. It's a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
All right, man. Good luck. Thank you.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.